Gata for the sound of the bell. Mind calm, body at ease, breathing quiet, sentiment benevolent. Dharma friends, sitting still in vital silence. Wanting nothing, we practice eco-Buddhism together. The sound of the temple bell booms for all to cease from conflict. May the way of Buddha usher in the dawn of non-violent global village forever. Here is the after sound of the bell. Thunder of silence, light after Dharma rain. Amoga Vairochana Mahamudra Mani Padme Jvala Pravartaya
Please join in the three refuges, first in Sino-Korean and then in English. Chi, chi, quim yon ye, chi.
Punyane Shivam Samse Chemam Chahe Sanchu Ilche Shivam Samse Shemam Chahe Sanchu Ilche Sangha Ajum.
I go for refuge to the Buddha
I go for refuge to the Buddha
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment
I will cultivate a heart of enlightenment
and realize the great way.
and realize the great way.
I go for refuge to the Dharma
I go for refuge to the Dharma
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will penetrate the teachings
I will penetrate the teachings
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
and uncover oceans of wisdom.
I go for refuge to the Sangha
I go for refuge to the Sangha
and resolve with all beings.
and resolve with all beings.
I will seek peace and happiness for the many
I will seek peace and happiness for the many
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
and transform this world into Buddha lands unimpeded.
Please return now for a brief period of meditation, followed by a Dharma talk. Please join me in some mindful stretching as an end to our meditation practice. Remember to breathe into these stretches. A nice full inhalation. And exhalation as we fold. Inhalation. And exhalation. So please gather around for the Dharma talk, and perhaps if we could have the camera a bit closer. So reading first from the Dhammapada chapter, The Just. If you determine your course with force or speed, you miss the way of the law. Quietly consider what is right and what is wrong, receiving all opinions equally, without haste, wisely. Observe the law. Observe the law. Who is wise, the eloquent or the quiet one? Be quiet and loving and fearless. For the mind talks, but the body knows. Gray hairs do not make a master. One may grow old in vain. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Zen Buddhist Temple and to the spring equinox. I hope that you were able to enjoy your day yesterday and do something a little bit special for the equinox. This is also a special time in our Buddhist calendar. Next week is the Parinirvana service, in which we celebrate the passing of the Buddha. So this week, we're preparing for that special ceremony by having a special Dharma talk on the last days of the Buddha. The person who's doing our Dharma talk is Gogsan Richard Harris. You may know him from Peace Camp. And he very recently completed his Dharma Guardian training and will be receiving a special Dharma Guardian certificate in the near future. So his final presentation, his final paper, was on this topic of the final days of the Buddha. So please, we look forward to hearing what he has to say. And now I'm sending our Zoom link over to Gogsan.
Hello, everybody. I hope that you can hear me and that the sound comes through, and hopefully the internet connection works well enough that we don't get cut off. If you can't hear me, just send me a chat, or sounds like we're good. We're good. All right, good. Thanks, Maon. Yes, it's my pleasure today to be able to talk to you about the Buddha's passing, which we will be celebrating next week. And his passing was very significant, one of the more significant times in his life. Remember, when we talk about the Buddha, we talk about his birth. He was born in the Lumbini garden. We talk about his attainment of enlightenment at Bodhgaya. We talk about his setting in motion the wheel of Dharma at Sarnath. And then the last thing we honor is we talk about his entering of parinirvana at Kushinara. So it turns out there's a Pali Sutra called the Mahaparinirvana, which outlines the last 3 months of the Buddha's life. And interestingly, it's actually the longest sutra in the Pali Canon. It's about 30 pages. And I read it, and I encourage you all to read it as well. It's very interesting. And it covers some of the things that were going on in India at the time. And it definitely chronicles his last days. Because it's the longest of all the sutras, I wonder if it might have some important significance, if that's the reason why it's the longest. There's the most attention paid to it. So it makes sense that we would search there for some insights into the Buddha's passing and insights into his life. So I know it's kind of an uncomfortable topic, but death is very significant. It's a very significant part, of our time here on Earth. And we talk about death in a number of places throughout our practice. One of them is after we do our prostrations, we say, "Great is the matter of birth and death. Impermanence surrounds. Be awake each moment and don't waste your life." So the hope is that at the time of our passing, we feel like we've had a full and rich life, and that we've accomplished many of the things that we wanted to accomplish. But it's kind of sad on one hand, in that it's the passing of our life, and everything that's fabricated and made of conditions is subject to decay and passing away. But on the other hand, the fact that we do have this one life really makes it special. And one of the quotes by a poem from Emily Dickinson I really like, she says, "Because it comes once is what makes life so sweet." So in that sense, it gives a lot of significance to our passing, and the significance that our life has meaning, and it's so sweet because it comes only once. In Buddhism, we talk about suffering a lot. And when we think about our death and our passing, it's natural for us to experience some suffering. It's natural to fear about letting go and going on to the next thing, whatever that may be. One of the rivers of suffering in Buddhism is actually death. The four great rivers are birth, disease, old age, and then finally death. But the suffering can actually be a door to liberation and a door to transformation, which we can access at that time in our life. So one of the things that's interesting about sort of the Eastern way of death is that it's not necessarily a bad thing, and there can actually be something known as kind of a good death or a good passing. You may have heard of the Tibetan book, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and in that book they chronicle what happens as we pass from this life into the next. And in that book they talk about how the Buddhist monk often actually longs for death and welcomes disease and welcomes those sufferings, because those are the doors to the liberation, to the next step. And this kind of is in contrast to what we think of in the Western world. Like in the Western world, we have all of these powerful medicines and machines to keep you alive, even though it may actually be time for your passing, right? So in some sense, in the Western world, we try to fight death. We try to make death not happen. We don't want death to happen. We don't want that transition to happen. We want to stay alive and stay in this world, even if it means the quality of our life is no longer there. So that's one of the differences sort of between sort of an Eastern concept and a Western concept, somewhat on death. So with that sort of background, we can talk about the Buddha's passing, and I'll talk for the rest of the time about the Parinibbana, the Mahaparinibbana, the sutra about the Buddha's last few months. So it turned out that he was traveling with Ananda at the end of his life, as he did much of his life when he was traveling and giving talks. And when it was getting towards the end, he was in his 80s. He said that he wanted to return to his birthplace. He wanted to go back to the Sakaya clan, which is where he was born. So at the time he was, when he said this, he was in Rajagaha, or near Vulture's Peak, which is one of the places where he gave a lot of his talks. And he said to Ananda, I'm getting old. I want to go home. And it's interesting to note that even though he was in his 80s, the sutra doesn't really talk a whole lot about his suffering, but we'll get to a little bit of it. Most of it talks about how he endured his suffering and old age with equanimity and great poise. However, when Ananda and the Buddha reached Boluva, the Buddha actually suffered a great disease. And when he suffered that disease, the sutra actually says, it says, when the Venerable Master had taken up residence for the rainy season, he suffered a severe illness with such pain that he thought he would die. However, the Venerable Master bore the pain mindfully and with great awareness and voiced no complaint. And it talks about how while he was having this illness in old age and the suffering, that he was able to endure it through meditation or dhyana. And the sutra places great emphasis on that. And it says, the Buddha said at that time, "It is not becoming for me to enter nirvana without addressing my attendants and taking farewell of the Buddha, but bhikkhus. I must exert energy to control the illness and retain my life force." So at this point in Boluva, he's basically saying, he realizes his life is ending, but he doesn't want to go through the Parinibbana, the ending of his life, until he actually teaches the bhikkhus all that they need to know. All of his students are prepared and ready to understand Buddhism for the rest of their lives. Interestingly, at this time, shortly thereafter, when he goes to Vesali, with Ananda, the next thing he mentions is that he says kind of to Ananda, do you realize that someone of my level of spiritual attainment is able to live for multiple eons? And he says it in this way. He says, Ananda, the Tathagata, who is developed in the four psychic powers, has practiced them well, has made them his practice like a yoked vehicle, has made them firm like the foundations of a house, puts them into action, has completely accumulated them, and has skillfully accomplished them, could, if he wished, remain in this world to the limits of his lifespan, or could remain for even a longer period. And in the sutra, it talks about the Buddha saying he could live for an eon longer. So he's basically telling Ananda, I have the ability to live quite a long time. Do you want me to do that? And what was interesting was that Ananda listened to this, apparently, and Ananda didn't ask the Buddha to live longer. And the Buddha said it again. He said, I can live for maybe an eon longer if you would like, and I can teach you. But Ananda didn't say, yes, please do that. And the Buddha asked him a third time. And it's really kind of curious when the Buddha says this, that Ananda just doesn't reply. And in the sutra, it says, they wonder if Ananda had been, possessed by Mara at that time and had possessed him to not ask the Buddha to stay longer. Another question I had when reading this was, why did the Buddha feel like he had to ask Ananda for permission to stay longer in this world? Why didn't the Buddha just stay longer if he wanted to? Why didn't he just spend eons, teaching his message? Shouldn't he live just as long as he wants? Why does he require the approval of Ananda for doing that? So finally, he states, after this, the Buddha says that in 3 months' time, he will unbind. And that's the word that they actually use in the sutra. They call it unbinding. When the Buddha enters parinirvana, he's basically unbinding from all of his physical manifestations and mental manifestations. And there's an interesting quote here where it says, the Buddha is saying, look, I've done everything that needs to be done. He says, Ananda, what do the bhikkhus expect of me? I have taught the Dhamma without any distinction between exoteric and esoteric teachings. In my teachings to all people, no master's fists exists. Only one who thinks, I will take charge of the band of bhikkhus, or the band of bhikkhus will depend on me, says something about the band of bhikkhus. The Tathagata, however, does not think I will take charge of the band of bhikkhus, or the band of bhikkhus will depend on me. How can the Tathagata say anything about the band of the bhikkhus? And then he says, Ananda, I am now old, my body's decayed, I'm wasting away with age. I have traversed this journey and reached the end of my time. I'm already 80. As an old cart will move only if strapped up, my body is kept going by being strapped up. It's only when the Tathagata does not dwell in his mind upon his outward characteristics, when he causes the cessation of certain feelings, and when he enters into the concentration of mind that had no outward characteristics, that his body is sound. So he's basically saying, I'm at the end of my life, and I'm basically being held together by these straps of my own consciousness. And it's only when I really focus on my meditation and my inward self that I'm able to keep going. So it turns out that the last straw that basically kind of came for the Buddha was when he was eating a dinner, one of his last meals, with Kunda, the blacksmith. And during that meal, it's interesting, during that meal, they said he was eating some dish, and they didn't quite know that historians have not quite figured out exactly what it was that he was eating, because the language that was used was sort of can be interpreted a couple ways. One of the ways is that he might have been eating some kind of a pig delicacy of some sort, which kind of is odd. I would think that the Buddha wouldn't necessarily be eating meat at this stage, but maybe he was. The other way of translating it is that he might have been eating a mushroom dish. Regardless, either way, after eating that dish at Kunda's house of the blacksmith, the Buddha had this severe pain in his stomach, and he told Kunda to bury that dish in the backyard and don't give it to anybody else, because no one else is going to be able to handle what that is. And he basically said, that's not something that other people should be eating. And the sutra also goes on to say that after he leaves the house, the Buddha is struck with a very strong bout of diarrhea and bloody like diarrhea. It's pretty graphic. And so he was undergoing a lot of pain and suffering at that time. So after that, Buddha and Ananda decide to go to Kusinara, which is the final resting place of the Buddha. He doesn't make it back to where the Sakya clan is. So he wanted to go back home, and he wanted to enter parinirvana at the place of his birth, but he wasn't able to make it. He says that when he reaches Kusinara, that's where he's going to be. He will finally unbind. And then in his last words, and these are words that are repeated throughout Buddha's text, the final words of the Buddha before he enters parinirvana are, all conditioned things pass away, perfect your practice untiringly. And in a sense, all of the Buddha's teachings can be summed up in these last two sentences. All conditioned things pass away, perfect your practice untiringly. And then after that, the Buddha enters parinirvana, and it's that state where it's the state of all-encompassing, extinguishing of all concepts, unfettering of all the fetters. He's totally unbinding. And there was a funeral pyre where they burnt his body, and he had specific instructions on how to wrap his body in certain cloths, etc., for the process. And interestingly, they said that his body disintegrated and only left his bones and teeth. There was no remnants of his skin or his muscles or his intestines or anything. All of that stuff just disintegrated in essence. And the only thing that was left was his bones and his teeth. And it was interesting. I was fortunate enough to be in Sri Lanka a few years ago with my family. And in Sri Lanka, they actually have a tooth of the Buddha, what's left of the Buddha. His remnants got dispersed, throughout the country of India at that time, and Nepal, etc. And so one of his teeth actually was smuggled into Sri Lanka. And there's a city called Kandy in Sri Lanka. And in that city, they parade the tooth around the town once a year on the top of an elephant. So it's a great ceremony, and it's a very big to-do in Kandy. But most of his other relics, we don't know where they are. We don't know where a lot of the other the bones and such of the Buddha have been kept, and they may be lost to us, lost in antiquity. So I wanted to end with a couple of thoughts about the Buddha's passing and what this kind of meant to me. The main question I had when I first started doing this was like, why did the Buddha have to die? Why was it that he did have to die? Like, couldn't he have just lived forever, like we were talking about before, when the Buddha told Ananda, he's like, hey, I can live for eons if you want me to. So why didn't he? I think part of that essence of wanting him to live forever is rooted in a failure to understand impermanence. And, death is certainly one of the major signifiers of impermanence of ourselves. Like we know that when we die, that's when our body ends. That's where this part ends. So that's really a very strong message for impermanence. So if you feel like you should live forever and never die, that means that you might have some underlying fear of that transition or underlying clinging to something that will not last. And so part of this message of the Buddha's passing, this impermanence, to me means that, he passed and he was able to relinquish his life. So why can't we? I also think that's a great strength. One of the things that Haju said in one of her Dharma talks in the past, she said, sometimes our greatest weaknesses are actually our greatest strengths. And I think that's telling here for the Buddha and for us as well. You can think of death as like a great weakness, because we all have to pass away. But that's like the ultimate weakness for us. That's when we end. That's when our physical body ends. So in that sense, it's a great weakness. But on the other hand, it's also a great strength. Going back to that poem from Emily Dickinson, because it comes just once is what makes life so sweet. That brings a lot of emphasis into the present moment. It makes the present moment also much more special. It makes our life also much more special that it's coming but once. And that's a great strength. Another great strength is for the Buddha to show that he can pass and go into parinirvana. So can we. And all of the accomplishments that he had made and that his bhikkhus had made and bhikkhunis had made, all of those accomplishments were done by humans that had a finite lifespan. And I think that's a great strength, that showing that weakness of death is actually a great strength. So that's one of the seals of Buddhism. We talk about different aspects of Buddha's teaching that are reflected in what he brought to us. One of them is impermanence. So that's one of the seals of Buddhism, is impermanence. So we talked about that. The other seal of Buddhism is non-self. And so what do we mean by non-self? We mean that we're actually made up of things that are not what we normally consider ourselves. We're made up of the energy from the sun. We're made of, oxygen that the trees give off. We're made of water that we drink. We're made from the food that we eat. We're made from a lot of things that we don't necessarily consider as the self. So there's no separate identity that we can attain to that we can say is simply just ourselves. We're actually part of this great interconnected web of energy and matter. So the death of the Buddha also reflects the non-self in such that when he's more than just his physical body. And that's carried forward into the third seal of Buddhism, which is nirvana, basically meaning that the relinquishing of all concepts, that nirvana, the parinirvana that he attained with his passing is there, but yet his message lives on in the Dharma. His message lives on in us as we talk about those concepts and those things. So in essence, he's living on and we are living on as carrying the message forward. We're living on as that Dharma that's in everybody and all things. That nirvana, the ground being of everything, is present in all of us. So those are the three seals of three seals of Buddhism: impermanence, non-self, and nirvana. And you can kind of think of the Buddha's parinirvana, his passing, as his last final act in his life to demonstrate the teachings that involve impermanence, non-self, and nirvana. So that's pretty much it. That's basically what I was thinking of with this. And I thank you very much for listening to me. And I don't know if people ask questions or if or what the next step is, but thank you very much for listening.
So thank you so much, Gakseong. And if you do have questions, I would encourage you to send them to the Zen Buddhist Temple, and we will get them to Gakseong so that he can answer them for you. So I really appreciate this Dharma talk, giving context to the last days of the Buddha and connecting to this very important key teaching of the three Dharma seals. So we invite you to come to our special service next week. If you have time this week and want to learn a little bit more about the last days of the Buddha, please look for the Parinirvana Sutra. You can find it online and you can read for yourself the events that Gakseong was referring to. So thank you so much. And now we move to announcements with Haiyun.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Gakseong. Roused us up about the parinirvana of the Buddha. Thank you so much. Gakseong mentioned the 4 admonitions that we do. We do prostrations in the morning, the last of which is do not waste your life. So in that vein, I want to tell you about a retreat that's coming up here at the temple, which you are invited to attend. It is our spring Yongmeng Junction, which is leaping like a tiger while sitting. That's sort of the loose translation of it. And it's a pretty intensive retreat. However, we're all together. There's going to be live streaming from the temples, so you'll be able to join in. There's going to be Dharma talks by our own Haju Sunim. And so in the e-bulletin this week, we'll be sending out the schedule of it. If you have an interest in participating, please contact us at the Ann Arbor Zen Temple at gmail.com or call us at 734-761-6520. And we will give you all the information about it. You don't have to come the whole time. It runs from April 1st to the 4th. So it starts at 11 a.m. on April 1st. Then it runs all day on the 2nd, all day on the 3rd, and then ends at 11 a.m. on Sunday the 4th. And so you can actually come in and out to various parts. If you only have part of the day to devote to it, that's okay too. Just let us know and we will work with you on it and accommodate your schedule, but try not to miss the Dharma talks because I think they're going to be wonderful. They always are. The other thing I want to mention is that we on Wednesday evenings offer a Wednesday evening sitting for all of our members and friends who want to join in. It is some sitting meditation, a little bit of chanting, and then we actually have a Dharma discussion there. So it's very interactive. And so we study a passage together and then we talk about it. So again, contact us at AnnArborZenTemple@gmail.com if you are interested in that. And what else is there? Well, anyway, there's going to be a lot happening. The other thing I just want to mention is it's coming on to garden time. We have a lot of seedlings going on. If you'd like to be a part of our garden team this summer, get your hands in the soil, get out there in the sun, work with the teachers here, please contact us for that too, because we are looking for bodhisattvas to join our team around the garden. We have a huge garden outside, and so it's going to be a lot of fun. So join in that too. Finally, I just want to say thank you for all of your kind donations, contributions. You keep us running, and we are so appreciative. Everything we have here is because of the generosity of our members and friends. So thank you so much. With that, I'm going to turn it back. Oh, me? I'm going to do the 4 great vows so that the camera doesn't have to turn again. So please join with me. All beings, one body.
All beings, one body.
I vow to liberate
I vow to liberate.
blind passions, one root.
Blind passions, one root.
I vow to terminate
I vow to terminate.
Dharma gates, one mind.
Dharma gates, one mind.
I vow to penetrate
I vow to penetrate.
the great way of Buddha.
The great way of Buddha.
I vow to realize.
I vow to realize.
Thank you so much for joining us. Have a wonderful spring day. Get out there and enjoy this.